Hello friends, and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. I'm in Luton this week. I'm back in a travel lodge because I'm back on tour. The only difference is I'm spraying everything with Dettol as I go around the country. It's really marvellous. I'm wearing a mask and gloves and it's very exciting to be back at work, but quite frightening. At the moment, cases of COVID-19 are rising again in the UK. And as a result, it feels a bit high stakes. So I'm on a very short tour. I'm only working with 3 clients and I'm taking a COVID-19 test by CityDoc at the end of my trip and then isolating from my husband until I get the results. I think going forward, this is what I'm going to be doing until we get a vaccine that works. They're not cheap, they're £125 each, but they're the only option for testing at the moment if you don't go to the NHS, and you can only go and have NHS testing if you have actual symptoms, which I don't. I'm going to talk about a subject, as always, very dear to my heart, and I'm talking about modelling levels and how, as a new model, I think perhaps you should consider going about choosing what levels you want to work up to. I hope this will be informative and helpful because I think, broadly speaking, in my career, I have done the right thing for myself, but everyone you ask will have different opinions of what you should do, and so I've been thinking a lot about it and what I would say to a new model starting now. And in doing so, I'm going to give you some insight into what I chose and how I have refined that along the way. So for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, modelling levels refer to the amount of nudity / sexual behaviour you are happy to exhibit on screen. So we go all the way from fully clothed fashion through topless glamour to artistic nude to more sexual nude to open leg. In the UK, this would be called UK magazine. Then there's US magazine, which is even more explicit open leg. And then there is toys or continental, which is using sex toys. Then there are the levels that incorporate multiple performers. So there will be girl, soft girl, where you're just kissing and touching and things like that, or hard girl, where you're actually having real sexual contact. And then there's boy girl, where you'll be doing all of those things, but with a performer of the opposite sex. So all models have to choose where they want to be along those lines. When I started modelling, my decisions were somewhat based on what people would think of me. I'm going to be really honest. I came from a very conservative religious background. I didn't know anyone who was pro-pornography. And so, although I knew I was happy working nude because I'd already worked naked as an actress, I basically worked up to the level that I thought I could do without anyone thinking bad thoughts about me. Now, this isn't a completely insane way to make a decision. We all have families and friends and partners who care about us and whose opinion we care about. So it does make some sense to consider what other people will think. But looking back, I'm ashamed of myself because I really bought into the idea that this scale was actually a value judgment, starting from perfectly fine at fashion through to really dirty at boy girl, and that I'd sort of decided how dirty I thought it was okay to be. With more wisdom and more experience, I realised there is not a scale from okay to dirty. That's not a thing. And if you think like that, it's like you think that everywhere along this line is a little bit dirty, a little bit unacceptable. Whereas maybe to think differently, think of it as everything is acceptable if it's consenting and legal and you're being treated well, but where do you want to be along this line from an aesthetic point of view? I think that would be a much more positive way to think. But the decision I made at the time to work up to artistic nude, although it wasn't a bad decision because it meant that I was doing stuff that I liked, I was making the decision from fear to a large extent. And so as I gained confidence and as I started listening to other models and photographers that I met, I did start to revise my opinion. I started to meet models who worked at higher levels than me. And to my great shame, it surprised me how nice they were. That I think I'd thought, because you can get paid more as you go further down the adult route, I think I'm really ashamed to say this, I'm sorry to say it on camera, but I want to because I really want to try to help other people not make this mistake. I thought that those people who were earning more money than me were probably really avaricious and hard and nasty. And then I met some and realised, okay, I'm entirely wrong. I've been incredibly prejudiced. This is not how it works. People don't go from lovely to horrible on this line. And as I started to meet fashion photographers and designers and models, I also realised, God, there are some absolutely bloody awful ones of them. There are horrible people and nice people along this whole continuum. And so making the assumption that I didn't want to work down this end of the business because of the horrible people I'd meet, that was not logical. What was quite logical is that by going down that end of the business, people's perception of me would change. That much is absolutely true, and I met that all the time. Photographers often talked to me at the beginning of my career, but a lot of them said really negative things about the models who did all this stuff down here. And I remember people saying things like, oh yeah, she's a great model, but she does very hard levels. Or, oh, well, she's a great model, but she's no good at art nude because she's gone very glamour. As though artistic nude was brain surgery, and unless you focused on it completely, you could never possibly hope to be able to stand by a tree with no clothes on, because you could also do porn. I mean, now, I think of that attitude as ludicrous as refusing to hire a plumber because you heard he's done a lot of kitchens. And well, like, we wanted him for our bathroom, but we just don't know if he can because, you know, he might put an oven where the toilet should be. Ridiculous, ridiculous. As a model, you can be competent at many genres, and doing one genre doesn't make you less qualified to do another. And I think it's quite a slut-shaming kind of attitude, but it took me a while to realise that. And I did notice that often when models were mentioned, people would sort of mention the level they worked up to in the same sentence. Oh, it's Tina who does girl, or it's Sophie who used to do boy-girl, but she doesn't anymore. Oh, like Sam who does open leg, and Lucy who doesn't do open leg, but I think she might do open leg. And so it felt to me as though the level to which you worked would encourage people to make a value judgment on you. And I think it felt that way because that was true. Is it still true? Yes, I think it probably is still true. I still hear people saying things about models that aren't always particularly positive when it comes to the levels they work up to. I wanted to do work that reflected well on women. One of the reasons I really liked art nude was because I thought it said something about women, about strength and about flexibility and about beauty. And at the time, when I was 25, I wasn't so sure about saying things about women, about sexuality. I wasn't so comfortable representing that to begin with, and then I got much more comfortable. And then I realised, you are a woman who likes sex. Why are you uncomfortable with representing that on camera? And that's when I started to shoot glamour images as well, because I realised it might not say anything truthful about women as a group, but it says something absolutely truthful about me. I do like getting naked and standing next to trees and making beautiful artistic images that don't have a particularly sexual theme, but I love doing sexual looking stuff. And so I started to think, maybe the thing I want is to be able to represent me truthfully. Maybe loading myself with all this responsibility to represent women is a lot, it's too much. I can just represent myself. So I decided to try to make decisions about the sort of work I wanted to do based on whether it said something about me that I was comfortable with. So as a result, I started doing bondage work, I started doing spanking work, and indeed, sometimes people did say negative things about it. So instead of being Ariel, that art nude model, she was, oh, Ariel, that art nude model who does some very kinky things. And you know, sometimes I did hear some things that I didn't love. But it was absolutely worth it for doing the stuff that I loved. Not only because it's a turn on, but because I was representing myself truthfully for the first time in my life as I really was, and I started to feel it, and I've only started to feel it more and more strongly as I've got older and more experienced, that I want to leave work behind me when I retire that says something real. I don't want to just represent other people's ideas of beauty and sexuality, I want to represent mine. So, fast forward a bit more, so I've been modelling 17 years, and I do bondage and spanking, and I love it, and so my work represents me much more truthfully. And then lockdown happened, and I realised that I'd still got some fear. And the fear isn't anymore what people will think of me. The fear is what people will try to make me do if I shoot higher levels. Will I feel forced to do that with everyone? And that is the other thing I want to address in this video, because I'm still on this spectrum and I'm working up to nude and I'm doing bondage and spanking. And I start looking over here and I start seeing things that I'd really love to do. And the fear of what people will think, it's still there a little, but much less than it used to be because I'm older and I'm more careless. But there's another fear, and the fear is, if I do some of the things I want to do down this end of the spectrum, will I feel forced to do those things at every shoot with everybody? And the answer is, that can happen for sure. So I decided I would like to shoot some much more hardcore sexual content because I do sometimes feel a little bit straitjacketed by the limits that I've set for myself. I've not represented orgasms on screen. I've not had sexual contact with people on screen. I've not done penetrative sexual stuff. There's a lot, and some of it is stuff I want to do. And so here are my 2 pieces of advice for you if you are a model trying to decide where you sit on this spectrum. 1, try to decide based on what you like looking at, not what other people like looking at. I liked looking at artistic nude work and I didn't like looking at open leg work. That's still the case, it just doesn't do anything for me. And so pictures that are basically about vagina, they're just not for me. I've got nothing against other people doing them, of course. One thing that it's taken me quite a long time in my life to figure out is that your first responsibility is to you. Think about what you like. Don't shoot stuff you don't like, because I'm not advocating here for everyone to shoot higher levels than they are. It might be that what you need to do for your happiness is to shoot lower levels than you do. Because I remember ages ago going on a location trip with a model who worked to far higher levels than me. She did up to Hard Girl, and she was on the cover of loads of adult magazines, and I was really impressed because I'd not been on the cover of anything yet. I was a new model, and I said, have you got copies of them all? And she said, I don't even look at them because I don't like them. It hurt my heart for her because I thought, if that's how you feel about being on the front page of a magazine, which is what so many people want, especially models, if that's how you feel about it, you shouldn't be shooting those levels, because if you can't look at it, you shouldn't shoot it. Because I'm thinking if she didn't like looking at it herself, if she wasn't proud of it, she probably didn't like other people looking at it either. It's not like I want every single person I know to see every single image that I'm in, because some of them won't be to everyone's taste, but I'm proud of every one of them. If any one of them was on a billboard opposite my house, I would be proud. I might be embarrassed too, but I'd be proud, and that's important. Shooting what you could stand up in court and justify as, yes, this is me and I think it's beautiful. I often go through that process in my mind. Not that I think I'm ever going to end up in court having to justify what I do, but I want to be able to. I want it to be easy. The other thing that you have to consider is what you want to do with who, because that is a big decision. So when I started modelling, this is something I heard from photographers a lot. Well, she does open leg because I've seen it on Femme Joy, but she won't do it for me, so I've stopped booking her. And oh well, she's done boy girl because I saw it on the internet. And now she's pretending she only wants to do art nude. She's not pretending. She's shot something. She doesn't want to do it again. And that, I'm afraid, is something that I think is still very, very prevalent in our industry. Understandably, photographers want a level playing field. So if a model advertises that she works up to nude, they expect that they should be able to hire her to work up to nude. Now, I think this is pretty reasonable, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect her to do with you on a first shoot everything you've ever found of her on the internet. The circumstances of that shoot that you've seen might be wildly different from the circumstances of you booking her for the first time. It might be with someone she knows really well. It might be with her partner. It might be an experiment that she tried once and didn't like. It might be that she was paid 5 times as much. It might be a photographer she'd been working with for 20 years. There are so many reasons why someone might do something with one photographer and they don't want to do it with another. I shot for Femme Joy once, and it was the absolute limit of the levels I was comfortable with at the time. To me, it was a bit more explicit than I really liked. And the pictures came out, and they were lovely pictures done by a lovely photographer and no complaints, but I didn't like them much. For me, they were beyond the levels I was comfortable with. For 5 years after I shot that one set, I had photographer after photographer asking if we could shoot Femme Joy Levels at the shoot. Well, now, Femme Joy Levels to me mean you're going to pay me really, really well. You're going to take me to a beautiful location. The lighting's going to be amazing. I'm going to have my hair and makeup done professionally. And we are going to shoot some slightly more explicit than normal pictures of me looking my absolute best. What it doesn't mean is I'm going to open my legs randomly for you during this studio day for which you are paying an hour of my time. That is not Femme Joy Levels. So I realised through that experience that yes, even if you don't advertise that you work up to a certain level, if people can see it of you somewhere online, some photographers will feel as though it's their due that you should do it with them. Now, I bought into this idea 100% as a new model. I thought it was really important to create this level playing field for photographers so that they don't feel as though I'm judging them. Now I feel like, well, if I'm working at the limit of what I'm comfortable with, I want it to look nice, so maybe I will do it with the people who will make me look nice, or maybe I'll do it with the people who make me feel the best. And actually, I think that's a completely legitimate choice for you as a model. So I would say choose where you want to be on this spectrum based on what you like, and then choose who you want to be on that spectrum with you at different points. It's totally fine. Don't false advertise, don't pretend you work to levels that you don't in order to get shoots and then row back on the day. Be clear in your communication and make sure your portfolio reflects what you're actually comfortable doing at the majority of your shoots. I would say there's probably no point putting your most explicit images in your portfolio if you're not really available to do that, except under very, very limited conditions. So, during lockdown, I found I had this opportunity to shoot more sexual content because I was at home, I got time and energy, and the problem of photographers potentially misunderstanding what I would want to shoot with them was temporarily taken off my hands because we weren't shooting with anyone. And so, first of all, I asked my Twitter followers how they would feel about me shooting more sexual content. And some people indeed said some quite judgmental things about, oh, don't degrade yourself, or, oh, well, you've always been so classy, I wouldn't like to see you being less classy. And I thought, oh, there we are back to this spectrum that I reject. I don't think there is a line that goes from really classy up at this fully clothed end to not at all classy down at this dirty sexual end, and I don't think there is a scale of not at all degrading to very degrading, because if there is, then art nude is somewhere on that spectrum. You're really saying art nude is somewhat degrading and topless isn't quite so degrading, but maybe it's quite degrading, and open leg is certainly degrading, and I don't want to think like that. I don't want to think like that about myself, and I don't want to think like that about any of the models on this spectrum either, because I don't think any of them are degraded unless they feel degraded, in which case, absolutely, they shouldn't do the job. And I don't think that I'm classier than a model who shoots open leg, and I don't think I'm less classy than a model who shoots only topless. This, I think, is a misogynistic lie, and I don't want to be part of it. This spectrum from fashion to boy-girl, it's artificial. There's this sort of expectation from the wider world that if you go somewhere along this line, you have to do all the things that are less rude, in general opinion, than that. So you can't just use this spectrum as a buffet. And I think, yes, I think you should. If you want to shoot art nude but not topless, that's your prerogative. By all means, make it clear to your photographers so they don't book you in error. But yeah, you should. If you want to just shoot fashion and art nude, you totally can. And in my situation, I wanted to shoot up to art nude. I didn't want to do open leg. I don't like it. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I find it objectifying in a way that I don't really like. I don't like the idea of feeling like the most important part of my body is my pussy and that the rest of me is just sort of there for the ride. And I don't really like the idea of shooting something that's sexually explicit in terms of genitalia on show, but isn't about sexual pleasure. Similarly, I don't want to do girl-girl, I'm heterosexual. It doesn't do anything for me. So I wanted to skip a whole bunch of levels and just go straight to boy-girl. Because I'm heterosexual. And I want to shoot stuff with orgasms, but I don't want to do it in the maximally most sexually explicit way. So that's the last thing I would say to models making a decision. Choose what you like, and don't worry about the fact that it might sound a little bit uneven and peculiar to people outside. It doesn't matter. The person who matters most when you're making decisions about your life is you. And if what you want to shoot is hard boy girl where you're always wearing a bra, do it. It will limit what work you can get, but you should do it. And so I've been having the time of my life shooting some really sexual content in the way that makes me feel comfortable, and I recommend it really thoroughly. I think that as models, the more thoroughly we can reject this idea that this spectrum is a hierarchy, I think the better for all of our mental health, and the better it is for our work as well, because if we can just work in genres that we're comfortable with the people we're comfortable doing it with, we're going to be in a much better situation. And in terms of creating work in the long term that we're proud of, I really think that's the way forward. So I hope you found that helpful, because it's taken me a very long time to be brave enough to shoot what I wanted to, and I think maybe if I'd been the recipient of some of this advice earlier, I might have been able to work it all through a little bit sooner and had longer in my career to experiment with stuff that now I very much want to do. A lot of the stuff I'm shooting is stuff that I don't think I'll ever shoot with anyone else, probably including my husband. It's been a solo project, and it might absolutely stay that way. But now, at this point in my life and career, I'm very comfortable saying that to photographers who try to book me for stuff I don't want to do with them. So, very best of luck. Choose wisely, choose the stuff you like doing, and the last thing I would like to say to you is if you find yourself doing something you don't like, it's totally fine to stop. Do not let anyone tell you that you are in some way tainted goods because you've done one open leg shoot and you've decided you don't like it. You are not. Because if you think like that, if you accept that you are tainted for doing open leg, well, you're a bit tainted for doing topless. If we're going to accept the idea that all of this is somewhat dirty, then I don't think it's a particularly helpful way to think about our bodies. So I'm definitely trying quite hard some of the time to shrug off that really unhelpful way of seeing women's bodies and the work they do. And I encourage you to do the same, because I think that if we go down that route, what we arrive at is the thing that's called being sex positive, and I'm pretty sure that's a good idea. So thank you very much for joining me. I'll be back next month. Maybe I'll be on tour again. Who knows? I'm just going to spray some more Dettol around, because safety first. Bye bye everyone, stay safe.